Everything sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel Podcast. This is a $5 Patreon episode. We are quickly going to the Candyman series. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, the man trying to put me into the bonfire, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hello, Tom.
We hear you're looking for Candyman, bitch. I appreciate that
Why
they
do you
included...
say it and it becomes a comedy?
Well, I appreciate that they included footage from the open audition for Candyman prior to the hiring of Tony Todd. Or maybe a stand-in rehearsal?
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. It's also interesting to see what other movies besides The Asphalt Jungle Bryan Singer stole from for The Usual Suspects. Because it's a short trip from we hear you're looking for Candyman, bitch, to give me the keys, you fucking cocksucker.
I like the actory way Kevin Spacey does his line reading of that. Give me the keys, you cocksucker.
With an unnecessary campness that should have told us everything. There and then. Why does he seem creepier than all these other guys who are also criminals?
Can't quite put my finger on it.
But that's only 3 years. That's only 3 years later as well. For some reason, it's hard to think of this as an early '90s movie. For some reason, it feels like it should have come much earlier than it did.
Yeah, it feels kind of like a late '80s movie, doesn't it?
Well, there's that, but it also, it feels late for this kind of franchise slasher, I suppose, because
okay.
By the early 90s, the Freddys and the Jasons and the Michaels are already kind of wrapping up.
Drying up, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, drying up is the correct, that's the correct,
and we're not
that's
quite,
the correct noun. Yeah.
We're not quite to the reinvention of Scream yet.
Right. So, it's almost, well, this is the interesting thing, and this is why this is. I'm so glad we're doing this so we can talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
That it's to me it's the quintessential early '90s movie because it's a literate piece of art house horror cinema, carved out of a yuppie nightmare scenario.
Right.
You know, it's Silence of the Lambs meets Hand That Rocks the Cradle.
I just rewatched Hand That Rocks the Cradle this past Halloween. Good stuff.
Good workman-like movie.
Curtis Hanson.
He's a good workman-like director. Yeah, so it's very of its time, and I find that interesting.
Well, on top of that, though,
both the movies we're gonna do, I feel like would be very different were they made at different times. I know you can say that about any movie, but these two movies seem kind of ripped from the headlines of their kind of moment in both film and society, I'd say.
Sure.
I mean, the other question is sort of, you know, one of these movies wants to talk about race explicitly, and the other kind of doesn't, and the answer as to which is which may surprise you.
I think you and I are on the same page.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of surprising based, because I'd never seen this before. Obviously, we've covered the Candyman sequels as recently as the future to you, probably listening to this.
Right.
You could this is conceivably the first series that if you're a member of our Patreon, you could listen to in chronological order.
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing it all simultaneously. So my preconceptions with this were kind of limited as well. And I got a very different movie than I was expecting.
Both times, or you're talking about 92?
Both times, I'd say that, yeah, both times, but I guess, to let the cat out of the bag, the silence on race in Candyman 1992 is deafening.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not just compared to 2021, but also in its own right as a story about Black history and set in Chicago in a Chicago housing project in the early 90s.
Correct. And then, it's funny because speaking to what you were saying earlier, where one is saying more about race than the other, and it may surprise you because, I mean, I honestly just finished watching this movie. Now, I'd seen both of these movies before, and you haven't seen them.
Mm-hmm.
But neither one of them are one that stuck in my collective consciousness of my own kind of, moviedom. I didn't remember these movies well. And, but speaking to the race aspect of it, I mean, it's skipping all the way to the end, but in 92, you have a funeral at the end, and then a procession of African Americans show up, and you have this uneasy feeling that the white people are like, what are you doing here?
Sure.
And all of a sudden, race feels like it's present in the movie in a way where it hasn't been, but it's like this underlying current that just is there the whole time.
Well, I'm surprised that it wasn't even an undercurrent, and I was trying to justify this historically. Like, is this the utopianism of the early 90s? The idea that that integration has already happened and our racial problems are over.
Yeah, we've already had the Cosby Show, so we're good, right?
I was gonna mention the Cosby Show.
Yeah,
but even and by 2020,
turns out there was an ugly underbelly to that all along.
Well, exactly. There's an ugly and to both integration and specifically the Cosby Show, which by 2021 we have no illusions about.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering whether it's part of that, but interestingly, I don't think it makes Candyman a less complex film. The movie still has a lot to say about class and gender and the sociology of urban planning, which is not necessarily gonna put butts in seats, but it was very interesting to me.
I found it interesting.
But nonetheless, you can't help. Then they never seem to be making that final connection to racial disparity. Even when they're discussing class and gender, it seems to be entirely separate. I'd say that this is a movie. The themes of this movie are class and gender, not race.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that's fine.
I do see race in it, though. I guess. I see it
they can't get away from it,
bursts.
but sometimes they don't seem to know that they can't get away from it.
Yeah, that I agree with, because the one that struck me is fairly early on in the movie where Helen and I guess I think her name is Bernadette in this movie, but I can only keep calling her Ardelia in my notes because she's Ardelia from Silence of the Lambs.
Yes, completely, yeah.
But when they go into the tenements and the mother is there, and the mother is talking to both of them.
Anne-Marie, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anne-Marie. And Anne-Marie is saying basically, what do you think of us black people? That we're this, that we're drug dealers, that we only do this, that we can't do that. And I kept waiting for Virginia Madsen to say, well, this is my black friend right here next to me, but they don't. Well,
yeah. And they don't, because it's interesting because they don't refer to themselves as black people, but they do say white folks.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think, her friend is at least mixed race.
Mm.
She's lighter skinned, but she's mixed race. So, but I feel like that just slipped out. Because what the difference between them is poverty, it's economics, it's class.
Yeah.
That's the distinction that the movie's making, and I think that was just a languaging mistake that actually, because it doesn't factor into anything
Mm-hmm.
that they're discussing on screen. Obviously, we can take a step back and, as you know, all of the welfare stereotypes that Anne-Marie's talking about were created by white people about black people.
Yeah.
But the movie's not taking that extra step, and I wonder, is it like we don't want to, or we choose not to because we don't want this to be a quote-unquote black horror movie. We want it to be a timeless horror classic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, but these are the questions I'm thinking of when I'm watching the movie. I'm like, well, you know, does that help you go back to it after 30-odd years and just see it for what it is and not have to kind of paint it with the same brush as a kind of issues movie?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Really, I mean, to let my second more long suffering cat out of the bag, I really found this movie fascinating.
Yeah, me
from
too.
start to finish, and effective.
To watch it again, and I want to say I went back and watched this movie certainly within the last decade, like maybe on the out like right around the 10-year mark. I know that I went back to it and found it just as interesting then. But like I said, it's for some reason, this is a 1992 movie that didn't stick with me. Unlike other movies we know.
Unlike Highlander 2: The Quickening.
Yeah,
of course.
unlike other movies from that period
and
of time.
that's why we're doing this podcast, essentially, isn't it? That's why we're condemned to these closets.
Yeah, exactly. But I got to tell you, it was I don't know. I think this movie provokes thought in many different ways, and down different avenues. It's a fascinating horror movie, and just movie.
Yeah, and I think an effective horror movie, which you can't say for either of the sequels, and we'll have the discussion about the reboot, which is also, as it turns out, a sequel. But we'll get there.
In the end, we fucked this all up. We're not supposed to be doing this, but here we are.
But yeah, it's interesting. Well, we are always watching through the prism of the sequels, but the kind of horror you're crying out for in Farewell to the Flesh and Day of the Dead is the template for that is all here. So it's even
right
more
here,
of a it's even more of a failure because the original showed you how to do it well,
right? And
you didn't learn those lessons.
Nope.
Is it? But one of my earliest notes is like, "That's how you do a jump scare."
Yeah.
Farewell to the Flesh. It's that simple.
Doesn't have to be hard.
No. Yeah. So yeah, both thoughts were going through my mind about that. You know, it was the kind of horror movie I wanted the sequels to be.
Mm-hmm.
But intellectually, it's working at the same level as the sequels, but interestingly covering different ground.
Mm-hmm.
So,
now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean So that's the preface. I mean, we're talking Candyman, a 1992 film, with. I'd really like to know because you can't trust this from when it's from 1992, but it has 79% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay, good.
But I wish I had a better sense of if that was true at the time. Because I honestly don't remember. Sometimes I have a memory of that,
yeah.
and I just don't for this movie. I feel like it felt like an elevated horror film at the time for critics, but hopefully that's just because it's what it is and what I hope they would recognize, but I don't know.
Well, it's kind of one leads to the other. I think that there's a growing prestige audience for horror movies in the early 90s that there hasn't been previously.
Mm-hmm.
And then, trailing that are the kind of movies that are going to appeal to those prestige audiences, which are generally kind of smarter. I mean, this is a literary adaptation as well.
Yeah.
Smarter movies, more erudite movies, and movies about the kinds of people who are watching horror movies for the first time, which is kind of upper middle class, educated, professional Americans. The movie's about them.
I was just gonna say, and the movie is about those people.
Those
the characters
right, so
are those people. So
it's to borrow a tired visual device from these movies. It's like looking in a mirror.
yeah.
If you're an early 90s yuppie watching this movie, you're getting a movie that is about everything you stand for. But because it's a horror movie, you get to interrogate it too, so you can have double the fun.
I'll say. Well, it's directed by Bernard Rose. He's such an interesting career. I noted that he directed Inside Out 3 and 4. No, those aren't future movies.
No.
From Disney.
Predictive movie making.
Yeah, I don't know what they are or who they're about, but have never heard of them. But I thought it was funny.
They're shorts, I believe. They're like installments in a kind of series of shorts.
Well, it's interesting because right after this movie, he seems to go the high road with sort of almost Oscar bait kind of movies with Immortal Beloved.
Yeah.
If you remember that film, and Anna Karenina.
About Beethoven?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Gary Oldman, right?
Gary Oldman, right, yeah. And Anna Karenina with Sophie Marceau and Sean Bean and Alfred Molina, and those are all people I know and have heard of. So...
Yeah, well, clearly this was, it's an unusual time because it's like someone using the horror genre as a step up rather than a step down.
Yeah, exactly.
which just tells you everything about how the cultural profile of horror movies had done a 360 in the early 90s. Because I guess Silence of the Lambs, Misery.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose because they both won Oscars.
They're Oscar winners, sure.
I mean, Silence of the Lambs won all the Oscars, but Misery won acting Oscars, which again is like challenging preconceptions about what's good about horror movies,
right.
Which traditionally has not been considered to be the acting. So,
but what's interesting is he's got this ebb and flow because he seems to be rising then, but then later in his career I noticed credits like SX Tape and The Devil's Violinist.
And a 2015
Frankenstein
that I've never heard of.
I never heard of, ever, yeah.
I don't know, it must be a copyright thing, but there are more versions of Frankenstein out there than pieces of candy corn. It seems. Just to bring it back to candy.
Yes, please.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, I was looking through my streaming services, I guess, when I'm looking for horror movies, and I saw about 4 or 5 modern, contemporaneous Frankenstein movies that I'd never heard of,
Me too.
And had appeared since the last time I looked. For Frankenstein movies, so I can only imagine it's a rights issue because it's not, we don't live in a world that's obsessed with Frankenstein, do we? Like we don't.
No,
there's nothing else going on that would make everyone go, oh, that's the popular route.
My favorite version that I'd like to see is that SNL skit where it's Twilight but Frankenstein's.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Like walking down the hallways of a school, like it's got the bolts.
Yeah.
And I think she was actually hosting that particular episode.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so just looking at him like it was Bill Hader. It's just looking at him like, oh, there's something about that Frankenstein boy.
That's good.
Very funny.
That's really good.
But
and I
this
guess,
movie,
and the Munsters as well. The Munsters got rebooted, and that's Frankenstein for that's Frankenstein
by one of our favorite directors.
Oh yeah. He managed to make the Munsters today, the 80s reboot of the Munsters, look less tacky. And that's a difficult job because
did you watch
that's
it?
One. Yeah, well, I briefly sampled it before realizing it was Rob Zombie, and then
Leaving.
Burn my television. It's getting to be a real problem. I'm burning too many.
I keep running out of TVs.
There's too many J.J. Abrams and or Rob Zombie productions on my TV for me not to burn it.
Well, this particular movie had a budget of $6 million, took an opening weekend of $5.4 million. In the USA, it garnered $25,729,000, and in the world, $25,795,000.
Okay.
Big time dollars from the world.
Yeah. Well, Clive Barker is a British
He's a known
person.
entity and a name, and
Mm-hmm.
he directed the first Hellraiser. Did he direct sequels?
I thought it was the other way around. I thought he direct. Oh, did he direct the original? I thought he directed
I think
some of the
so.
sequels. Okay. Well, we'll find out. Can imagine. I can imagine doing the Hellraiser series. What would we? How would we divide that up?
In chunks of 5. And
We'd
then
need to get an intern. if
We'd
we
have
wanted
to
do
do it
that.
like 10 times.
We'd need to get an intern to watch some of the later movies and then describe them to us, so we could pretend like we'd seen them.
That's what other podcasts do.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, let me ask you this. Because the movie starts, and the first thing I see is the Universal logo. But in my
Not
head,
from 1992, though.
that's what I said. I said, this is too newish.
Newish, yes. Well, it's a big loss as well, because that 1992 Universal logo would give you the creepiness you need to start a movie like this.
Plus, it matches perfectly with that grainy TriStar logo that I love.
And they kind of, yeah, and they take the sound out of it.
Oh, it's so good. Dead
Which is
silence.
a great choice. Which is a great choice because the music would have undercut the mood.
Yeah.
And I've never seen the TriStar logo without the music. First of all, that horse looks way less manic when there's no music underneath.
I know, right?
It's almost as if the mania is more in the music than the mare. but also, like I as I was watching it, I did the music in my head, and then I thought, yeah, that probably would set the wrong mood for this film.
Yeah.
Like da 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 da. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to automatically lead
Wrong
into
message. Wrong message.
those ominous shots of the tops of buildings in Chicago.
Yeah.
This is definitely the era for those, though, because The Fugitive pretty much starts in exactly the same way 1 year later.
Just, yep.
They could have saved themselves some
money.
like a shooting day if they just used the same
Can I
shots.
borrow
from
some of
Candyman.
that, please?
Yeah,
Sure,
they could
why
have.
not?
Given the troubled production of that movie, they could have written a whole nother draft probably in that time. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so that's my note. We got the above city credits
Oh,
that
delicious.
I love it. Although I'll say I like the inversion. I'll keep it for the next episode, but
What's a literal inversion?
yeah, completely.
We see those same buildings upside down.
Yeah. But I also my other note is one thing I really love about this movie is the sort of gothic quality to it.
Absolutely.
And a lot of that has to do with the music. It's very Phantom of the Opera in these opening credits.
Yeah, like
And seeing
I
that
wrote down,
juxtaposed against a modern city,
yeah,
there's something about it that makes me click in a way where I lean in and I'm already interested.
yeah, it balances classic and contemporary really well because it sounds like a church organ synthesizer. And of course, Philip Glass is a modernist composer. He's got those 3 or 4 notes he just kind of recirculates.
Yes, of course.
But the titles themselves, they're. I'm surprised this isn't on more lists of great opening titles. The way that the titles are geometrically aligned with the shape of the city,
the build, yeah.
The kind of different. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, this movie is as much about Chicago as the sequel is about New Orleans.
Yeah.
And it makes it an even more drastic decision to leave Chicago for the second movie, because the story is kind of
so rooted,
grown in the city in a way that is hard to translate to another place. Yeah, we see Clive Barker's name a few different times.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly they want everyone to know that this is a piece of literature, which apparently is very different from the film. Like
is it?
I think it really is it's a very liberal adaptation of that story, I think.
Okay.
I mean, almost Lawnmower Man level, I believe.
Oh, nice. I like the story behind Lawnmower Man. What was I listening to? Some podcast, and Pierce Brosnan was on it, and he's like, so what they had was this title of 7 pages that Stephen King wrote, and then they just took it.
Yes, the Stephen King asked for his name to be taken off.
And even sued them and won, and then they were like, no, we're just going to not do that.
Well, the law, as we know now, the law means nothing. It's another post 2020 revelation, along with all that we see in Candyman 2021. Yeah, and then we get this B-nado over Chicago.
But that's after because it starts with the Candyman's voiceover.
Oh, this echo-heavy Todd voice.
Yeah, on top of the most bees I've ever seen ever.
I mean, this is where I wrote, it's already scarier than both sequels, and the movie hasn't even started.
Exactly.
Just to hear, just to have that urban landscape with that echo-heavy Tony Todd voice over it, it's already more chilling than either of the sequels will be.
Agreed.
And it makes you wonder why neither movie starts with Todd's voiceover, right? It's always someone else's voiceover that starts the movie.
Yeah, King. What's his name? King. Who's the radio guy in the Farewell to the Flesh? Kingfish?
Oh, Kingfish.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's Purcell who starts the movie.
God, what a surprise to see Purcell in this movie.
I blew it. I was gonna, yeah. I was surprised. I felt so vindicated that at least one of the 4 characters I had assumed was a legacy character actually turned out to be one.
Actually was there, yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll get there. I believe my actual note is Purcell ? Not question mark.
No, mine is exclamation point.
Well, both work. Yeah, it's so interesting that the movie begins with this idea of it begins with a literature forward device, which is you immediately go into someone telling you a story.
Right.
In exactly this, and then the story is brought to cinematic life. And it's interesting because it's exactly the same devices used in Reservoir Dogs the same year. With Tim Roth's,
yeah.
His fake backstory.
His story. That's so interesting because I didn't remember Reservoir Dogs, but I remember thinking as I was watching it how effective it was.
Yeah.
As a device.
Yeah, and you're kind of it's about the nature of storytelling and the same thing, the small details. That's what convinces people. Yeah, not actually the truth of what you're saying. It's about how convincing you can make it.
There was something going on even at the very start of this movie with the credits, the way they roll out, and then as that story starts, the first thing you hear is it's the scariest story I ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
But you're kind of hearing that over the animated bees over the city that turns in a like a time lapse kind of slow fade into her cigarette smoke.
Yeah.
Which is all very visually interesting. Like there's a director who seems to be at the beginning of his career, but he seems to have like quite a hold on exactly how to present this movie.
Well, yeah, and I mean, this is where that's how you do a jump scare. You know, the audio-visual shock and horror of Candyman appearing for the first time, and
great, and so quick.
It's like well, exactly. It's instantaneous, and then it's over, and then you know, the audience has time to breathe and kind of react. And later on, we have a jump scare where you kind of kick yourself for buying into it, and I think that's another aspect of the jump scare that's overlooked. You should after it, you should go, "Oh, I can't believe I fell for that."
Yeah,
that's kind of another part of it. And then we're like Rodney Dangerfield back to school. The University of Illinois with John Connor's stepdad giving the lecture. I mean, I know him better as George Mason from 24.
I remember him from 24 for sure.
But certainly at this time, Xander Berkeley's getting some pretty big supporting roles.
Yeah, because this is the next year after Terminator 2. So I remember thinking this was the start of something for him as an actor. He was in Terminator 2, and then all of a sudden he's got this big part in this movie the next year. And it was I just kind of put myself in his shoes of just thinking, oh my God, my career's ramping up. I get to do real acting in a real movie, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and he's kind of stayed at that level, but, you know, he's had multiple turns, like memorable turns in TV series, not just 24, but also The Walking Dead, where he played one of the most iconic, visually iconic characters from the graphic novel. And kind of he did a J. Jonah Jameson actually took the time to act like it was drawn. Like he was interviewed and he said, you know, when it's a spoiler, but when X happened to me, I looked at how X happened in the graphic novel and said that's the way I want it to look. That's the expression I want to have on my face when it's happening, so everyone knows that I've read the book and I'm doing that. Awesome. That is awesome, and he seems to take that kind of care, which I think is why occasionally he just pops out of whatever he's in, and we all love him for a little bit, and then he goes away and does CSI Miami and all that.
Whatever he has to do to
whatever
put food on the table,
do, which is often in that era CSI Miami.
Yeah.
But the content of what they're talking about, of course, because this is a horror movie, is the theme of the film, which is the interrogation of urban myths. Like, everyone's telling stories, and he's trying to trace the source and fact check them, and saying, "Okay, that's two different cities. How did you both hear the same story?
1,000 miles apart. How do you both know someone that had this happen to in each city?" Yeah.
And it's interesting that it's alligators in the sewers, which kind of keeps coming back in horror movies. Like, well, like horror science fiction, you've got you know, Drew Barrymore and E.T., and then the Alligator series.
Well, in the Alligator movie we both watched recently.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, Alligator. Yeah, the that's what I meant by the Alligator series.
Oh, I thought you were talking TV.
Oh, Alligator PI? No, I wasn't talking about that. You can have that for free, Fox, or with you. Some to replace 911. And then the next thing we see is that Helen, played by Virginia Madsen, is writing a book. So it's a very literature forward film. And that's what horror movies are now, because the people who watch them read books as well.
Right.
Or at least there are people who read books and will admit to watching horror films as well. I think there was, always those people. Mostly the people making the movies who were the intellectuals, but still,
Yeah.
the Ramiros and the Cravens or whatever, they were highly educated people, but highly educated people at least didn't admit that they were watching horror movies, and this provides a safe space for them to go, no, it's not a horror movie, it's a movie about a woman who works at a university.
Yeah, that's right.
And is writing a book about urban myth, and is having
But
relationship
she's writing
trouble.
it with her friend, and
Yeah.
then when she's kind of going back to our discussion earlier, because I think this movie, like, race is a part of it, but never, like you said, I don't think it's ever spoken directly to by the movie.
No.
And so you have Helen working by herself, but then and it goes to what you were saying about class distinction as well, because you have two old African American women who are the cleaners, right? And they're cleaning the classrooms, but they're going to school her and teach her about this sort of legendary kind of story about the Candyman.
Yeah, and I think it's a mixed message, because it's literally the black characters in this movie had a voice. They're the ones telling the story, but they're purveyors of myth as well. So there's that kind of mystic stereotype. And again, going back to Stephen King and the way that his black characters are in horror movies, this is not too different. There are occult experts, right? Kind of taking us through the movie, and it's a little bit problematic, and they're being contrasted with this white intellectual woman who's all about reason and facts and information.
So something interesting that's happening here in this moment to me, and obviously it's not intentional, but I think this movie actually shows white privilege in a way.
Yeah.
That's hard to put my finger on. I mean, it's easier later in the movie, but I'm going to save it for when the moment comes up. But it starts here of just, well, I'm working on this. Can I talk to your friend? I was surprised that the friend was actually in the hallway. I thought she was going to have to take her
it's awfully convenient, isn't
her,
it?
but
everyone who knows about Candyman is within earshot.
Yeah.
But also, it's the idea of, again, it's the idea, potentially problematic representation that, that the black characters come from an oral culture, whereas the white people come from a written culture.
A written culture, yeah.
And that's more of a byproduct of how they're telling the story, because we got to get this information out as a starting point to the narrative. But at the same time, those distinctions are fairly kind of cut and dry.
Yeah. But it's the one woman that, like, looks out in the hallway and is like, this lady's got questions for you. And it's like she's at her beck and call almost. It's like, the white woman needs us, get in here. And so...
Yeah, absolutely.
There's just something within that I find fascinating watching it in 2024, where it's just sort of there on screen. And of course, they would never know that that's what they're kind of representing in the moment.
Yeah,
filming it.
I'm immediately put in mind again of The Fugitive in the scenes where he's
Aren't you always?
Well, I know, but it made me think of that he poses as a cleaner.
Yeah.
But in order to do so, he dyes his hair black and pretends he's Latino. So, the movie's sort of like, oh, this will be a great way for him to blend in. Mm-hmm. But think of all the assumptions behind that the movie's not addressing.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's Harrison Ford in brownface. But, that's... It's interesting that this was one of the many audio samples that Candyman 2021 used, this story. Almost like... Yeah. Let's sieve out the good from this, which is that these, these are, this is an oral history community that's able to tell our story and is valuable in that sense. But also, I mean, the privilege as well, that it's kind of like white people are seen as unequal, both in terms of class, but also in terms of gender.
Yes.
Because as soon as the first contact she has with John Connor's stepdad, it's revealed that he's usurping his wife's book with his like he's lecturing on material that is gonna make it harder for her to publish or make money off the book she's gonna make.
But in true man fashion, he makes her feel guilty about it.
Right, and he's clearly fucking one of his students as well, even before it's confirmed later in the movie. So I'm like, where are the rifts here? And they seem to be within the white community based on gender and sexuality in this scene, which I just think is, it's definitely something to pay attention to. And I was briefly in academia, and this kind of, misogyny and sexism, even between, like, romantic partners who are both academics, reads very real, like...
Yeah, very much so.
Uncomfortably real to me, so... They actually... I mean, in general, I feel like whoever has written this movie and maybe directing, acting in the movie understands the world of academia really well.
I thought so too, because in that moment,
these are kind of deep. These are deep cuts from what it's like to be an academic.
Yeah, because I remember having conscious thoughts as she's walking down to talk to her husband in the lecture hall.
Yeah,
and it's almost as though he's an actor.
Yeah,
because he's a teacher acting like the cool teacher in front of his students, and. Like we've said this a lot, like just put it on screen. Just let the camera fall back and just let it play out. Without, there's no commentary on it. It's just there. And then, of course, she's seeing it and comments on it.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know, as a movie, it just makes it so much more interesting a watch for me.
Yeah, and
it's layered in different ways.
Completely.
There's a lot underneath it.
There's a lot underneath it, and there's a lot of kind of knowledge in it, like the knowledge and experience in it, because they even make it clear that he's teaching while she's on research leave, like she's taking a sabbatical so she can do this research. And I don't know, like in all the movies I've seen about academia, I've never seen like someone point out this kind of job reality in the same way. Like it like, when I was an academic, I was like, the academics in movies or TV never seem to do any work. I'm working 24/7.
Right.
So this movie like understands this. Like, it's not that she's not working; it's that she's on research leave to write this book, and that's why he's teaching focused at this moment, because that's what he's doing. She's not teaching a class. All that sort of stuff. It's just, I don't know. It's just it gives a kind of context that, again, it's not said directly stated at any time in the movie, but the movie is better for that dimension, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
If you're going to represent this world, represent it in a rounded way, and I think it really does.
Represent it fully.
Also, I mean, this is more of a overall horror trope, but going to the library with the microfilm readers.
Oh, yeah. I was
displaying
like...
murder headline stories. I mean, that's in Silence of the Lambs as well, right? She does that in Silence of the Lambs, I think.
In my notes, I wrote, "To the microfish."
Yeah. Even the microfish. Yeah. So, and again, I mean, it's, inevitably the 2021 version is less satisfying, but that's not the fault of the movie. That's the fault of culture, because now you can just get that on a laptop. You don't have to even leave your home to do it. Yeah.
All right, tell you what, we're about to have Helen explain to Ardelia, who I call Ardelia, the whole structure of her own condo building and the city around her. Why don't we take a break and we'll come right back?
Oh, I love a bit of urban planning.
Oh, it's good stuff.
Yeah, let's do it.
You're listening to good fucking music right now, I tell you.
Yeah, those 4 notes are excellent.
Oh, I was going to say, probably overused that one section, but...
Sure.
But still good.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be right back. And we're back once again, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, that was our first break. Apologies. We're back.
Well, we're back once again because we've previously done episodes.
That's true. We're talking about Candyman, the 1992 film, directed by Bernard Rose.
Who's not a person of color either, right?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think he is.
But with a name like Bernard Rose, it sounds like your assertion, like you were talking about, he probably knows a bit about academia. And that sounds like an academia name, doesn't it?
It does. It certainly does, yeah.
It reeks of it.
I would say so, yeah.
Well, like I said on the way out, Helen is going to talk to Bernadette about the city planning, the urban planning. And I find all of this, like, I was so leaning forward in this moment. I found it so interesting, talking about when she goes to the window and talks about the cutoff line and how the city gave up on that portion of the city, but this part of the city could be,
but it's the same building,
in quotes, saved, and it's this, the same layout. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you were saying earlier about the Gothic, because this is really good Gothic.
Yeah.
Like the way the sort of the marrying of modern and classical history, which is something the Gothic does very well. So this idea that there's this, she's reading about this kind of historical monster, but it's kind of keeping pace with rising urban crime in Chicago, so there's a kind of a parallel there. She'll later make the parallel more firmly, that it's a coping mechanism for that. But and then the idea of these yuppie apartments built over former housing projects, because in Gothic, the theme of most Gothic fiction is return of the repressed. And that's exactly what's they're doing that in a social sense here, talking about, this is a building that has the roots of poverty around it, and that poverty is going to rise to the surface and come out and eat you, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's so many interesting kind of questions and thoughts about society and geography. Makes you think about the own place you live in, and how areas rise and fall.
Yeah.
And the great thing about being a piece of cinema and having that big window is you can see it all. It's an illustrated lecture, right? It's not it's not just verbal. She's looking out, she's making those connections visually as well.
You can see it build up or fall down around you.
Yeah, completely. And I think, there's also a plausibility behind it, because, you take a step back and you go, well, one thing I know about white people is they don't like to interrogate their history very much.
Yeah.
But white academics, especially those who seem to be like in the deconstructionist school, absolutely would. So this isn't implausible at all. It's just that she belongs to that section of the white society that is willing to ask those questions. But again, like, they might be asking the wrong questions, because they end up talking about property value, right?
Yeah.
So their yuppiedom gets the better of them almost. It stops them from going further into the self-interrogation, because they're just like, I can't believe I paid this much for a former housing project. If
this was a housing project, why did you pay so much for it? Yeah. And then let me ask you this, because eventually we get to the thing we'll get to in all of these movies, which is somebody's got to dare somebody to say the word you shouldn't say 5 times in a mirror. But my question for you is, because you're seeing this movie as the second to last of all these movies you've watched, so I don't know if you could go back and put your first time goggles on.
And you're literally talking to me, because I'm the only other person apart from you who has done it this way.
Right. So I guess my question for you is, as I watched them do that, I was hooked into when I first watched this movie.
Yeah.
Which was, I know something they don't. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And Bernadette stops one short, which, makes me go, whew, for her, like she dodged a bullet. But I felt like it was handled the best out of all these movies in this moment. And was wondering, is it just the fact that it's the first time and I'm remembering that? Or to me, it's actually the performance. Like the two actors seem to handle it the best out of all the actors we've seen try this.
I completely agree. Because I mean, it's preceded by another really good jump scare, and it was what we were talking about in relation to Jaws. That most of the time, jump scares are better done on the characters in the movie than the audience.
Yeah.
But it has the adverse effect of making you relaxed at a moment when you should be on edge.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it does in Jaws as well, I think. And you've got... This is literally... It's interesting you talked about performance, because in this scene I was like... my only thought was, why is Virginia Madsen not a big and household name these days? Yeah. I mean, she's got pretty much everything. She's charming, she's natural, she's charismatic, she's beautiful.
Yeah.
And, you know, the only thought that crossed my mind is there a little bit of body fascism here? I mean, she doesn't have that. She's not like stick thin we expected women to be in the early 90s, and her weight's gone up and down over the years. And I'm like, is that a depressing thought? Is that it? Is that the only thing that's holding her back from becoming a major film star outside of independent cinema? But anyway.
It feels like Patricia Arquette is having her career.
Kind of feel. I mean, you know, the quality of her work is great. You know, she had a recurring role in Frasier. She's obviously got Sideways, but you can't point to any big breakthrough. Performances that she absolutely.
When you think about this movie, and you think about Sideways, you think about two movies that you feel should have broken her out. More than she's been.
And not Paul Giamatti.
Yeah.
Yeah, why did he come out of that? And fucking Thomas Hayden Church as well. Like, he's not gone anywhere since then, and he's the standout turd of that movie.
I like Paul Giamatti just fine. I don't begrudge him his breakout.
But, you know, he doesn't. He's fine. He's the right vehicle. So, but I immediately thought, because I'm watching this through the prism of the sequels, that this makes the sequels' overuse of the mirror device seem even more egregious.
Yeah, right.
Because the original digs in on this early.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you know, it's just that it's the de facto version of this that everyone is trying to recapture. So I think you're right. I think it is the fact that we can even sort of sift through the many repetitions and imitations of this, I think says something about how good this moment is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't like it in the sequels and reboot happens multiple times, and I don't think it happens again in the movie, does it? Like maybe once more. Well, I mean, it happens at the end in a very strange way that I'm still not quite sure I understand.
Yeah, it's weird, I admit.
But apart from that, they're not repeatedly doing it, right?
No.
Throughout the movie?
There was a moment. Oh, she does do it later when she's at the hospital.
Oh, just to get rid of
the doctor,
the quintessential 90s character actor. Yeah.
He looks like. Speaking of Terminator 2, that guy reminded me very much of Silverman.
Well, he's in. Well, we'll get there, but
character-wise, I was like, oh, yeah. You could have brought in that guy from Terminator 1 and 2 and had him just be there again.
Again, like I have the mixed character actor heritage. Norman Neil Williams in the Tales of the City miniseries, and the producer that Ed Wood takes his movie to, who watches it and thinks it's a practical joke. It's one of Billy Wellman's practical jokes. So that's my association with him.
All right.
Yeah, and something I noticed was a great piece of set design is the Commedia dell'arte mask on the wall of her bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think speaks to the self-awareness of myth versus reality, which is a big theme in Commedia dell'arte.
Sure.
So that's a niche kind of bit of niche prop they got there. But this is where the kind of yuppie nightmare aspects of the movie really hit home to me, because you have that moment where which is kind of another jump scare, where the where the husband leaps on her in the middle of the night in his beguiling way.
Imagine Xander Berkeley like right underneath the camera, waiting.
Yeah.
It's like, go.
And again, it's like, it's yuppie nightmare rules. The husband is the greatest threat to the heroine.
Yeah.
This is sleeping with the enemy, or you know, any of those or all the way to through to what lies beneath.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, okay, this is definitely tapping into that vein of storytelling about yuppie romantic relationships.
Sure.
And domestic, like the surface of domestic bliss, which is kind of eroded is eroded in those movies. Yes, complete facade, right?
Well, my next note is that we're driving to the housing projects, and as I'm watching it, and the music is playing over it, and you have that long shot of her tiny red car, sort of, it feels like the car driving into a haunted house is what it feels
Definitely.
like. And the gothic kind of nature of it, to me, I just loved seeing that this urban setting could be a modern horror house.
Yeah.
Through the eyes of the director. I thought that was really cool. Because it's like all she's doing is driving there, and it feels unnerving and scary and puts me on edge.
Yeah, and again, what's clear is that what they're afraid of is the urban poor, not specifically black people, which you would say is probably unrealistic for even in the early 90s. But and it's Ardelia who is voicing the most concern about what they're doing. Which I don't know if that's necessarily a choice or that's just how they wanted to kind of write the conflict between them. But it's surprising, right? You would assume that.
See, but what I think is interesting
that she would be more comfortable going to a place like, it makes you into a racist because you assume she would be more comfortable going into a place like this. But she, but it also doesn't go as far as a lazier movie would have done, where she's like, "Look, I grew up around here. I know
exactly,
these people."
Right. I was just gonna
That's where I thought it was going to go. It's like, well, props to you for not going
these
down.
People. Right.
It's like, yeah, she could have conceivably come from an upper middle class home. Like, why not?
See, but what I think is more interesting, because again, like, I think you can, like, you can dig below the surface with this movie, because this is a white privilege moment to me, where her ambition is outsizing her danger reflex, and she's the one that can't conceive of the fact that she could get in enough danger to die. Whereas,
completely,
when you're watching a horror movie with an African American audience, it's always the black people that are saying, "Get the fuck out of the water! What are you doing?" They're the common sense people.
Well, and that she's got that, but she's also kind of theorizing why she's okay, because she's like, they're using Candyman as a coping mechanism for the daily horrors of their lives.
Right.
And it's interesting because this obviously, mostly for the purposes of horror, this movie pours cold water on that theory. Candyman is, there might be something symbolically related between the two, but Candyman is real.
Right.
We don't know this till halfway through the movie, which I think is another masterstroke of storytelling.
I was surprised
that he isn't.
Yeah,
that
45
he isn't just,
minutes in before we see him.
That he isn't just part of like people's imaginations. I love that choice. But she's sort of saying, "Oh, this is a sociological need, or an anthropological need that they're satisfying." And it's interesting. This movie takes the line that she's wrong, and then 2021 takes the line that's right. That's exactly what's going on here. That's how Candyman comes back into the world, into the real world, is whenever bad shit's going down for these people.
Right.
So it's just interesting. You've got an original, a reboot, both with opposing
viewpoints,
like, messages about
messages and
viewpoints on what the movie means. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
One is like in diametrically opposed to the other. And then this housing project seems to be policed by members of Run DMC,
Yeah.
to the best. Yeah. Oh, you know what? I actually wrote down housing project is the modern day haunted house. So,
There you go.
and I think part of it is like you keep the because the thing that's scary about haunted houses is often that they're dilapidated.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like they could fall apart at any moment. But we've added on here a fear of the poor, which is kind of a more is the modern day kind of scare story that you can transplant onto it. So it's got both. It's got both going to it. But again, this is a literature forward movie, but it's also an art forward movie as well. So
Sure.
we narrate the film through the graffiti art that she sees when she gets to the housing project. It's like a code to be deciphered, Da Vinci Code style.
Mm-hmm.
And it has.
But they changed that one line because the graffiti on the doors in the hallway say "Sweets to the Suite." Haven't we been saying "Sweets for the Suite"?
Oh, okay.
So did they not go back and watch this movie?
I think that changes at some. I think that changes at some point during one of the sequels. I think.
Okay.
I mean, we'll talk when we get to 2021. Basically, refuses to admit that those sequels exist. So
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that they loop back to this. I might be wrong, but
I don't think so.
and also she's basically. I love the fact that she's going into her own home.
Mm-hmm.
In a different part of town.
Yeah.
Because, again, that's
she
good
knows
Gothic,
the layout
right?
exactly, and yeah.
It's the idea of the uncanny. It's familiar and strange at the same time, and that's what horror or the Gothic kind of trades off. And to do that architecturally, I think, is really clever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because she knows her way around, right?
She knows her way around, and when they get into
funny.
that apartment, the story they've been hearing about a young woman that was killed by Candyman, and she knows the layout, and she goes into the bathroom, and we didn't mention this before, but she could get one way that killers, and this is actually something that I believe Bernard Rose discovered was real.
Oh.
That there were actually in Chicago different apartment buildings where you could get into one apartment from the other through, like, say, the medicine cabinet, like you can in this movie.
Wow.
And that's how actual murders did happen. And
wow, that's like a Sherlock Holmes
Yeah.
locked room mystery.
Yeah.
But the door was locked.
Yep.
Was it a snake, or did someone just reach in through the medicine cabinet and kill him?
But
wow.
what's interesting
That's
is when she's in the housing project and she takes the medicine cabinet out and there's the hole, or that she just opens it on this side. But there's the hole, and it's kind of like going into the belly of the house, of the haunted house. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it has that gothic, mythic kind of stature.
It does, and if you're doing a direct comparison to the sequels, we talked when we did Farewell to the Flesh about, or in the future we will talk about Farewell to the Flesh, depending on when you're listening to this. And we might, you don't know, we might mention that there's a scene in a dilapidated house that doesn't make a whole lot of sense of what we're supposed to be thinking or what our reaction is supposed to be. So this is what the sequels were trying to do, but less successfully. Like, you feel the danger of them going around these derelict apartments, and and the threat of the people who run these apartments as well. And that's never made clear in the sequel. They're just like squatters.
Yeah.
These are not squatters. This is like an organized gang they're essentially, they're the guards.
Taking control of the building.
Yeah, they're literally guarding the building.
Reminded me of The Wire.
Yeah,
Where
definitely.
you can't even enter the building there, and there's that one scene where the cops just drive to the outside of it and start some shit, and then bottles start flying.
Oh, that's right,
The
yeah.
car gets burnt and all that shit.
But it's okay because he becomes a math teacher.
Yeah.
Uh, And also, tell you what else.
After killing an innocent black man who was a police officer.
Just shows, I mean, yeah. No other TV series would make that choice to redeem that guy, right? And then, well, it also reminded me of Halloween 2 because there's some candy razor blades.
Yeah.
In the pile of shit that she finds. And it's like, I think when we talked about that movie, we talked, because that's a classic urban myth, there's razor blades in the candy. So again, it's the idea
whatever,
that, what if the urban myth is, or in the apples, yeah. It's like, what if the urban myth is true? Like, it's kind of putting that thought in your mind, which because will pay off.
They have that be part of the actual structure of the legend in the 21.
That he's given out candy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which doesn't come back in either of the sequels, right?
No.
Yeah. That's interesting. But you know, then we get the introduction of Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie.
And this is Vanessa Williams, is that her name, the actor? Mm-hmm. Who, if 2021 is anything to go by, is aging backwards.
That's why
she looks older here than she does in a movie made 3 years ago.
When I was taking my notes, and then I saw that she came back, and I thought, well, who the hell is she in that movie? And then I realized that, well, we'll get to it about why this is a direct sequel. But I had the same exact thought where I thought she looks 20 years younger.
I know motherhood is hard, but come on.
That's ridiculous. It's 30 years later?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's again, like, I feel it's more class and gender forward than it is race forward, because the type is, she's a working mother.
Right.
Working single mother. Working single mother. And again, like, you know, the race is obviously a part of that. Mm-hmm. But it's not what the movie's foregrounding here at all. No. Even when she calls them white folks, it's clear that it's about, you know, it's about yuppies of any race coming down to the ghetto and making
She's
trouble.
Making a presumption about them, about what story they're telling.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting is there's still that sort of white privilege where Bernadette won't say shit, but Helen is sitting there saying, what a beautiful baby. What's his name? And she's trying to connect to her on this deep kind of like personal level, as though, you know, it's kind of Rodney King. It's like, we can all get along. I can make that happen because I'm white. It reads as naive. Well, yeah, it reads as naive until kind of it's vindicated, I think. Mm-hmm. Because her perception changes. The perception of her changes. Although I guess we don't know quite how much until 2021's version. Right.
But even in the editing, this kind of distinction is suggested, because you have that hard cut from Anne-Marie telling a story to the academics sitting around having dinner in a nice restaurant.
Exclamation point.
First girl, exclamation mark. So class and education are the key contrasts here.
Yeah.
And so Purcell, let's talk about Purcell. Not so secret ponytail this time.
Yes, right.
Letting his locks flow loose.
Letting them flow deep and I don't have another word. Well, yeah. So Purcell is, apart from Tony Todd, the only serial connective tissue. Yeah.
And we didn't even think he was in this movie.
Yeah, we didn't think he was in this one, but
doing the same job as he does in the second movie.
Yeah, he does.
Well.
It's interesting
he's the unreliable narrator.
How well he plays that character again.
Yeah.
3 years later, he seemed to be very hooked into that character. But for me, this is the most successful retelling of the legend I've ever seen, too, because
completely they got
you're
it
not
right
flashing back, you're not doing anything, you're hearing some of the soundscape of it, but just that slow push in on Virginia Madsen's face is fantastic. It's done so well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you when we did the sequels, you hadn't watched this for a while.
Yeah.
And you were trying to remember, like, what's in the original movie, and then what do they add? What parts?
Because I couldn't remember if they called
but it's
him.
pretty
if he was
much
a
all
painter.
here. They say he's a painter.
Yeah.
That's all. The artist is there. The pregnancy is there. I thought that maybe that was a kind of sequel addition.
Invention. Yeah.
But it's not. But the sequel is just taking a kind of latent plot point because they don't make anything of it for the rest of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like like you. I like the way I think it's the classiest way that the story is retold. But at the same time, I like that that should you want to make a sequel, it leaves room to do a visual reinterpretation.
Yeah.
Because all we've heard is the audio, and also just gives us kind of it just thumbnails the facts of his life, and then you can dig into that too. So it works. It works for both, and the emphasis is slightly different as well because I don't think I clocked from the sequels, and maybe this is because I'm not watching attentively enough, but they sort of say he was affluent, he was well educated.
Yeah,
and
that
also,
part seemed new. I felt like he was poor in the retelling of the story, like he was a.
Or maybe they did mention it, but it really comes across here.
Yeah,
and especially they explain it something that. Again, elides the racial part of it. It might not... Obviously, racism is behind his attack. But as this story's told, it could also just be that he's new money.
True,
because his dad... It talked about his dad invents a piece of industrial equipment.
Right.
That's where he gets his money from. So it could easily just be...
And what's interesting about that is, it stays within class for this movie.
Yeah, that he's new, new money, the same as like having a white trash dressed up in a white trash person like Cletus dressed up in that.
Right.
Yeah, this story would be very different if Candyman was Cletus, the Slack-jawed yokel. Some folks will never eat a skunk, but then again, some folk will like Cletus, the Slack-jawed yokel. But that after that scene, I was like, oh, he's new money.
Mm-hmm.
That might be part of why they attacked him.
I thought the same thing.
Again, class, economics. That's
what I'm saying, though. It's so fascinating that's the focus of this movie.
Completely.
And even through the retelling, well, not retelling. We're hearing it for this is the first movie made.
Retelling for us.
Retelling for us.
We live in opposite land.
Yeah.
Up is down, black is white.
Yeah, but I found that fascinating as well. But I also found this fascinating because I've been talking about the bits and pieces of white privilege within the story, because in the following scene, she's talking to the little boy who lives in the housing project.
What a great scene.
And the manner in which she essentially tricks him to get what she wants. Make him show her where the Candyman attacked a whole other victim. Now we're off the young woman and onto a young boy victim. Mm-hmm. But that felt particularly pernicious to me. The way she handled that, I thought, oh
yeah, I thought the same thing. That I from both sides, I thought the way that she's mistreating him, but also he's very creepy. There's something wrong with this kid anyway.
Yeah, he's going to be ready for murder by the end of this movie.
Oh my god. I mean, it's an incredible performance.
It's very good, isn't it? Yeah.
That's not even marred by the fact that it could be Gary Coleman playing this role. But boy, I mean, it's I don't know how old this actor or character is supposed to be, but he looks like he's lived 1,000 lives in his face.
Right.
And, again, it's like living in a place like that ages you before your time.
Sure.
And that is all there, but also, he's got that, in a horror sense, he's creepy horror kid.
Mm-hmm.
par excellence. So it works on all those levels. But yeah, I like that. I like both aspects of it. That especially the sentimentalization of children in the sequels and in sequels generally. It's a nice antidote to that, to see adults not giving a shit about children, but also children are slightly unnerving in and of themselves.
Right.
Oh, and I love the scene, just the scene of them. It's so well done when they head out to past the bonfire, which we're told about because it will become relevant later.
Yeah.
And for no other reason. But you can see the whole city in the background, from where they are, and I just like it's asking you to take in the meaning of what you're seeing within this larger context of the city around it.
Right.
And the skyscraper built. I mean, it is an incredible sort of image of the skyscraper built of wooden boxes that's going to be set on fire.
But that's the thing is,
it's like a Wicker Man, essentially.
Yeah, it's a Wicker Man. But it's also, you feel the isolation because you see the city in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And this place is like the land that people forgot. And they're left to their own devices, so much so that you can build a 3-story tall pyre to have a huge bonfire on.
But the thing is, it's kind of interesting because this might be not lazy storytelling, but sloppy storytelling. It's like, it feels like they knew they were going to end the movie this way, and it's like, I'm going to have to mention at some point that there's this.
Well, what you should do is just walk past it. Don't talk about it, but
and
just
not
walk
say
past
anything.
It. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But it's like in The Wicker Man, about 20 minutes in,
right?
The police officer walks past. What's that?
What's that huge
wooden
thing
structure
over
there?
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
I'm Christopher Lee.
It's nothing bad, I can tell you that.
We're not going to burn you in it. I'm spoiling so many movies. I can't help myself.
They've been out for a long time. Fuck
they
you,
have,
you
and it's also
seen
called The Wicker Man. I don't know what you expect to happen when a movie's called The Wicker Man. Unless people thought that that the lead characters turned out to be made out of wicker at the end. We get more
bees.
Storytelling prompted flashback. Well, more bees, yes. So this recurrent device of oral history, and
yeah,
it's interesting because it's like, it's a slasher story. It's like a slasher movie, but told as oral history.
Mm-hmm.
Like what they're doing is like a scene from a slasher movie, but it's being told to you orally, which I think is really, really interesting. It's also sort of, this movie is not that kind of movie, but that kind of pleasure is in there.
Right.
So it's making all these distinctions about what kind of a horror movie it is, but it doesn't deny you the pleasure of traditional pleasures of horror movies either. So I like that. I like that balance.
All right. But then this movie kind of takes a turn, and it makes a bold choice in this moment because she's attacked by
the Candyman gang.
The kingpin of this gang.
It's the Candyman gang.
The Candyman gang. And it feels as though you don't really ever get an explanation of this, but I assume that the legend this criminal is borrowing so that he can be more menacing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a good fake out, I think, because you can suspend disbelief at this point that Candyman is just a fictional character that people have appropriated in the real world.
Yeah.
So I like that it keeps that going. It's also a precedent for the goth cult in Day of the Dead.
Right.
But again, it marries that idea of, past violence and modern violence.
Mm-hmm.
But also in a way that I feel is like more of an undercurrent than it is in the reboot. It's sort of the point of the whole thing. But here it just seems to be like a stage in the story where you think it might not be it might not be supernatural, and there's lots of riding on the idea of fantasy, which talks about how it's like it's best when you don't know whether it's real or not.
Real or not. Yeah, exactly.
And that's where horror kind of comes in, and I think that's what it's doing here.
True. But what I found interesting, kind of trying to watch this through the eyes of this being the first movie, as opposed to watching it last, because the other movies all feel very accelerated, the sequels at least, where you're saying the word 5 times in a mirror quite quickly.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen until, I don't know, half hour, 20 minutes at least, 25 minutes into this movie, that kind of thing. You're setting up so much. You don't see Candyman until 45 minutes into this movie. And so when this movie takes a turn in which she fingers, identifies that her attacker, and she's going to go to court, and then Candyman appears, and the next thing you know, she's waking up in Anne Marie's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And the other movies, it feels obligatory and like, okay, here's where the part where nobody will believe her and like the cops are after her. In this movie, it feels like a real turn. Like this movie decides to go in a direction that's totally off kilter and throws you kind of for a loop for a while, but is daring to me in a way that I find really interesting. And I'm glad that I could still see that within this movie, having watched all the sequels.
And it's just, in a sense, it's just like a heightened version of a yuppie nightmare, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're accused of you're accused of a crime that you didn't commit. You end up going through the prison system. You end up getting treated like a poor person.
Mm-hmm.
We're not quite there yet. I mean, but the idea of it, the police procedural element, which again, at least Day of the Dead is earnestly trying to revive this because it does play a role here.
Right.
We're introduced to the kindest old man cop you'll ever see.
Yeah, right.
And he takes a turn. He's a different person once the nightmare is. He becomes the nightmare version of this character at that point.
Sure.
And and Candyman's even compared to Dracula, I think, in these scenes. Like they even make the point of comparing him to Dracula, whereas like obviously that is in the sequels that he's kind of Dracula-like, but no one ever mentions it except in this movie. It's interesting because after she's attacked, we get some really interesting gender stuff. Firstly, which time is it that she calls? Oh no, it's not it's the first time we don't see his reaction to her being attacked. It's only after she's arrested. But
now she goes in the parking garage.
Yeah, so she goes into housewife mode after she's been attacked, and he's just and George Mason is just totally apathetic to it, and we know part of it is that he's fucking his student, and that's why he's late for dinner. But again, it's like there's this issue of gender identity. It's like she's been attacked and physically attacked, and she kind of retreats into traditional gender roles, and he's kind of acting them out with her, but he's not. He's backsliding into his own kind of gender stereotype of the of the philandering husband, or just the kind of the academic sleeping with a student. I like both of those kind of tropes that
it feels as though as she's making that dinner for him that this is the happiest she's ever been, right? That's how she's presenting herself to him.
Exactly, yeah. And what it's so interesting. What I think, I think it's to Ardelia. She sort of complains about how much is being done for her because she's white and rich. And she says, well, like, what about the people who live through this every day? The police don't lift a finger for those. And it's like, this is one of, I think, your white privilege moments of, methinks the lady doth possess too much.
Right.
Right? Because without that, you're fucked, right? You're essentially dead on the street.
Yeah.
And rather than kind of recognizing her privilege and acknowledging it and being grateful for it and trying to do something, to help the people she's talking about, she's just sort of saying, the police are doing what they should be doing, and she's still not happy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're nearly halfway through the film, as we said, before we're even sure Candyman's real.
Yeah.
And again, as if the sequels make this clear as well, but all you need is the voice.
Because it's so good.
And the profile, he's so far away from the camera when you first see him.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, that's partly an atmosphere choice. But it's also kind of no, that looks good. Looks good. He doesn't have to be in close-up or anything. Yeah.
It's good. It's good enough.
It's really good. Zero window dressing needed.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, the graphic dog murder... Not something I'm ever happy to see, especially when it's a Rottweiler.
I gotta tell you, I don't like seeing that, but but one of my thoughts was, man, that's a good looking dog head right there.
Too good.
The prosthetic they made, I was impressed by.
Yeah, prosthetic in quotes. Yeah, well, but I mean, it's I think by the 90s, certainly, it's a taboo. There's the statistic about people are killed all the time in TV and movies, but the only time anyone ever writes or to producers or calls TV stations is when an animal gets hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a taboo to break. They stop short of the baby kill, but it almost looks like they're going in that direction as well.
Well, so they've got a sequel to make decades later.
They're preying on the sentimental weaknesses of the audience here.
Yeah.
For animals and children.
But it is what you were saying about that, the suburban nightmare of just waking up in a room. Yeah. You're covered in blood. There's blood everywhere. There's a dog head. There's a screaming mother. And you've got the knife. You've got the hatchet.
Yeah. It's interesting that, the movie's trying to show us that she's being victimized and that she's being tortured. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of not clocking that worse is happening to those around her in the crossfire.
Yeah.
The collateral damage of this is hurting this community more than it's hurting her.
Mm-hmm.
Because now they don't have a guard dog and her baby's missing, in addition to everything else she has to go through on a daily basis. But, and then in the next few scenes, which I think are some of the best in the movie, where she's being processed.
So good.
It's she's an affluent white person who's being made into... She's joining the criminal class.
Yeah.
I mean... By the way, I've seen so many examples of this story, from Shawshank Redemption to the TV series Time. I've never seen a bad version of it. It just works. This idea... Or Oz as well.
Yeah, right.
The idea of, affluent white people, Orange is the New Black, which I cared for less, but is pretty good at times. Mm-hmm. This idea... The story of the affluent white person being kind of thrown...
Processed.
Jettisoned through the prison system is amazing. So she's kind of forced to be empathetic with the urban poor for what she's going through, and that suffering is the lesson that she's supposed to be learning. Even, something well, we've seen an actual example of how this could be done badly in Day of the Dead, but the bloodstained bra.
Yeah.
I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say Virginia Madison's tits are incredible. You don't lose sight of that.
No, I
don't. You don't lose sight of that, especially when the bloodstained bra is actually accentuating how magnificent they are, but. That the point of the scene isn't titillation. It's about the indignity and the humiliation that she's going through. It's just that she has perfect tits.
Spectacular tits.
I mean, that's not... There's nothing she can do about that. Oh, it's distracting, but not so distracting that you don't get the point of the scene, which is her being forced to undress. And then there's I think the most... the anti-racist message of the movie put to the test is that they have her kind of say, "Can you bring in the black cup?
Yeah.
The black male cup? I don't want this heavyset white woman looking at me."
But what's interesting to me is there's still that idea of privilege behind that, because I know that guy, and if I just tell him my story, then I'll be let go. And there's the pleading with it too. The why aren't you doing what I'm telling you?
Yeah.
I need kind of tone.
Yeah.
Like, please, can I just please? Like, this is all I need, and then everything will be okay. And you're just facing the white woman who's saying, "Give me your bra."
Yeah. Absolutely.
Put it on the floor and, toss it to me.
And it's such a well-judged turn. The cop, when he comes in, the detective,
oh my God,
like he was pure Uncle Tom in the first scene we saw for, and now suddenly he's transformed into Jack Webb from Dragnet. he's all just the facts man now.
Yep.
And all the while he's wearing the coziest looking fucking cardigan
sweater,
I've ever seen. It's the way I imagine that, like, when they called him to like, he was in bed and he just had that as a blanket, put his arms in it, and left the house. It looks that cozy. And of course, she calls home, and husband's not there because he's fucking a student, and this is all abundantly clear. So it's digging in on the dysfunction that's already there in her white yuppie life.
Sure.
In her marriage.
But I like that the movie's not giving him up yet. I like that there's that moment, because she's going to say, "Where were you last night?" And he's going to say, "I was right here. I just was sound asleep. I didn't hear it."
I didn't believe it for a second.
No, of course you don't believe it for a second.
Oh, okay.
But I like that the movie is letting her dangle for a while.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And he kind
because
of
when you're in
her.
that situation, it's so easy to rationalize that it's possible that the worst thing is not happening to me. I don't want to believe it.
I would completely sleep through a phone call. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have.
Trust me. All right. Well, she's about to go home and get a hook through the mirror. Why don't we take another break and we'll come back?
Yeah, I just mentioned that, speaking to the gender repression of it all, he instantly burkas her. Like he's like, here's what it's like, rather than trying to find like an exit that doesn't have reporters in it, he's like, "No, here's what we do. I'm going to cover your body completely." And then
you look down.
It's like, and you genuinely get the sense he's secretly enjoying this new power he has over her that he hadn't necessarily had before in this situation.
Well, not just that. I think he secretly loves that he has found his out.
Oh, he was asleep because it was 3 a.m.
No. I mean, the husband has found, like, she's going to be charged with murder any day now. I've got my out.
You think he's thinking about it that early on?
I do.
Wow. He really is a piece of shit.
Yeah, he's garbage. He's no good. I did myself wonder. I mean, they make a point of saying it several times that the reason they haven't charged you yet, blah 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 blah, like the child is probably still alive. But I did find myself thinking, how'd that white woman get bail?
Because
I don't think that white woman even got bail on Law and Order.
Yeah. Well, I guess all he needs to do to redeem himself is be part of a nuclear accident and find out he has mere hours to live, like George Mason did. And he suddenly turned into the nice guy very quickly.
Took a
saved
turn
everybody.
There.
Yeah.
You know what? I think I'll help now.
And he started monologuing about how he wanted to be a teacher. Oh, what a great show it was back then.
They're coming back with another one. Like another season or something.
That's what I hear.
Netflix or something?
Yeah.
I forget.
They tried that before.
They did it once. But with a different actor, right? Wasn't there?
Yeah, the guy from Straight Outta Compton.
Yeah. I remember it not being good.
No, although I think... Why stop now with the spoilers? Don't watch it. I think they brought back... I mean, it's set in the same world, so Jack Bauer isn't in there, but there were a few returning faces. Also, I think President Jimmy Smits or Senator Jimmy Smits in there
From West Wing? They cross...
from
Little cross...
from Attack of the Clones. Yes,
Promotional? From Attack of the Clones.
I think he plays like a senator or a businessman. Anyway,
Oh, I don't remember that.
Carlos Bernard's Tony Almeida is in it, so
Very good,
that's
then.
not a reason to watch it.
All right, everybody, we'll be right back after that little recap, right after this. And we're back again, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here discussing
For real
Candyman.
this time.
For real. From 1992. All right, where are you in your notes? Because I'm at the part where that hook does come through the medicine cabinet again, and then Ardelia gets it. And I think this scene is good stuff.
Yeah, I'm a little bit before that. The scene where they're sitting around in the living room
Talking about the case?
talking about the case, and
That's
there's
right.
I made a note about the TV news reporter, and you know how I bulk at using real TV reporters, but I feel like they really could have done with someone here, because this is the least convincing TV reporter I've ever seen.
Now
They've
that you
just
say
thrown
that,
this-
I do remember thinking, like, like weak performance.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
it's like a Real Housewife trying to do a news report for
Yes,
an
right.
audition. I was just interested in the discussion because there's a weird proto-inversion going on here, and you know how we love our proto-inversions if you're listening to this in the future of the past. Of the O.J. Simpson murders,
Yeah, right.
which haven't happened yet,
Yeah.
but this is like the flip side. This is what, and I thought, this is what O.J. thought happened. It's like, oh, she was probably just Candyman who got it.
Yeah. Right. It's not me.
And essentially, like what the lawyer says about the same sort of, doesn't he mention the blood out, like they don't have a blood alibi? I'm like, oh, this is weird.
All the blood was from the dog. There's
Right,
not
exactly.
blood from the baby.
So
but-
O.J. Simpson must have contemplated using that defense that
Yeah.
it was dog's blood or something. But yeah, then I'm into the well, you can see I'm developing a theme here. Lower right tit in bath.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's that kind of like playing with the titillation of the slasher, but always falling down on the side of restraint. And again, I don't know if that's like Virginia Madsen's insistence, but it seems
also,
like the
you've
kind
got
of
it
movie.
backwards. It's her left tit.
Is it a left tit? Okay, thanks, thanks, tit master.
I know, because I was really looking.
Well, you have a picture of it framed in your office right now, so.
It's like every movie
Yeah.
we watch, there's another tit
Oh.
up on the wall.
The tit, that's it. Yeah, that's the new slasher, the tit master. And then he just goes slices off the tit of all the women he's seen in movies. It's pretty good. Can I go back and do my pitch?
Yeah.
The tit master. Enter the tit master. Yeah, so... and then there's the slideshow scene. More still images in a moving picture medium.
I really like the way that laid out, though. You mean when she's in the
Yeah.
cop car and the flashing lights and going back to the mural in the housing projects and all of that stuff? Felt
Yeah.
like art cinema for this horror movie. I really liked it.
It's like cinema. It's like cinema art almost, because it's like narration through tableau,
Yeah,
which
right.
is like if you ever watch a biopic of an artist, the action is mostly shown through tableaus. Like I don't know if you've seen Lust for Life, the Vincent van Gogh biopic with Kirk Douglas and Anthony Quinn.
Mm-mm.
But that is essentially shot as if it is a living version of one of his paintings.
Okay.
I think something similar is going on here. Yeah, that hook through the medicine cabinet, immaculate timing.
That got me really good.
That's the point where you're left kicking yourself for being so scared.
Yeah.
I think where it's like, oh, it really got me, and I wish it hadn't. And that's the sign of a good jump scare.
Right.
You're angry that it got to you.
Well, and I also like, because we've got some kills that are going to kind of be coming, not like back to back, but
Yeah, well,
you have Ardelia and you have the doctor, and what they choose to show you as opposed to what they choose not to show you really works. And putting aside, it's a little awkward in the editing about when the husband comes home, because you hear Ardelia comes into the house,
yeah,
and you hear what happens to her. And again, we've talked about this in the sequels, about this sort of the trance that the heroines go into.
Sure, yeah.
Under the power of, it's like they've been drugged by the Candyman. But she's trying to get her to stay out of the house slowly by, no, don't stay out. But,
yeah.
but then you can hear Ardelia getting it, and the next thing you know, the husband's turning around the corner. And so it's an odd edit, because you don't see him enter the house, and you know he wasn't there before, so you're like, is this her imagination? Did he actually do the killing?
Well,
What's going on?
Yeah,
But,
I don't know. I thought it was clear that she was just blacking out every time, and because we get like, pretty soon we're gonna get like a 3-month ellipsis, which says to me that she's kind of missing, real missing kind of going on in her brain, like a Home and Night Out.
Scene missing.
See, yeah, exactly. The scene missing. And it's interesting, like, this is obviously what they're referencing in Day of the Dead, when her roommate or friend, was she a roommate? The actress who was
I think
her
they were
friend
roommates.
dies?
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's the idea, it's like, who's getting the blow, like, it's just the black characters who are getting the blowback from everything, even though she's the one going through this. Experientially, it's somewhat worse for her, but the blowback is it's punishing the people
of color,
who already being punished socioeconomically,
right,
or culturally. Yeah, and so this is where she goes to the hospital. Arrested for this.
She's arrested, and that's when we're in the police
one of those
car.
Jail hospitals that appear mostly in horror movies. I don't know if these places really exist. Yeah. But there's always a point. It's like, do we take her to the nut house or do we take her to jail? Let's split the difference and take her to a jail hospital.
You know what that reminds me of, actually, though, is that when she first wakes up after Adelia's killed, she's like on white sheets. And in that moment, I'm like, oh, we're at the hospital. And it turns out we were still in the apartment. And then they take her to the hospital.
Yeah.
But then we have that scene where he appears. This is a pretty good device for the doctor to say, no, you're just crazy, because there's cameras in the room, and Candyman appears and is like sneaking under her hospital gurney under the bed. And she just looks like a stark raving lunatic yelling about Candyman. And then interestingly, because this is, he's already started it, but Candyman is starting to say, make the choice, come with me.
Yep.
In this movie, it all makes way more sense than the other movies.
It's much clearer, isn't it?
It's about living in mortality and being a part of the story forever. And all of that seems a lot more clear in this movie.
Yeah, I think it's better. The story is better told in general, but I also think that it's on point with the theme of the movie, which is the sort of disparity between myth and reality. Yeah, and Candyman seems like an excellent nanny. And he's kind of like nourishing the baby with the honey from his finger.
Suckle on his finger.
And his hook makes a pretty good mobile in a pinch,
We know that from the credits of Candyman 3.
We do indeed, which was probably a mobile, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're learning a little bit also about possible powers that Candyman might have, like being able to fly like Superman. So maybe Candyman is like Superman or Batman. It's his superhero name, maybe.
Yeah. But I love that moment with the doctor and there's a moment where I can't remember exactly what he asks. I think he's just kind of essentially saying, well, you tell me what happened. How did this happen if it wasn't you? There's that kind of slow push in on her face of, you just like are letting the actor work. And it's an actor saying, like thinking, the character is thinking to themselves, well, I could tell them that I said Candyman 5 times and he appeared and killed them, but that's not going to be good for me.
It's going to make me sound crazy.
Yeah. Such a
it's
great
like
moment. But she never says any of that. It's silent. You're just watching it on her face. It's such a good moment. And then when she actually, I think the movie does it's a great moment when she says Candyman the 5 times and there's that pause. Just long enough for you to believe maybe he's not going to appear in front of this doctor. And the next thing you know, that doctor's getting ripped from the backside.
And and again, like, it's scarier when he's part of the real world and just kind of fits in seamlessly. Because again, he appears from under that desk with no embellishment.
Right.
There's no ghostliness, supernatural quality about him. He's just a guy hiding under the desk who's going to kill you.
But I very much like that Batman through the window maneuver as well. That was fantastic.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Batman, those 4 TV sets. I'm grateful that when I saw them, I'm like, well, they're gonna play something. They wouldn't have said that. Right. Play something. Yeah. But it's an important in the story that we see how the rest of the world sees Candyman. And this is a common complaint I have for most like movies that incorporate fantasy. It's like, I want to know not just how the person who sees the imaginary thing interacts it, but I want to know how the people around them see it. The
people who don't see it.
Yeah. It's like, if going back to the Rise of Skywalker, what's like Chewie and, Finn seeing when Rey's going off on her vision quests? Is she just standing there in the middle of the desert, like monotone, motionless? How long is this taking? Minutes, hours? And this, this is, good time. They keep, and it's not 3 months, it's a month. Sorry, I've just realized now. But she's been in there a month, so we have that ellipsis. But the movie's kind of keeping track of the timeline as well, of what's going on. And there's lots of time. It's happening over a long period of time, but it feels like it's taking place quickly. But the movie's accounting for that. Right. Whenever that happens.
Well, and then the movie becomes the fugitive. She's gonna escape.
Fugitive or North by Northwest, yeah. She does. She dresses up in like nurse's scrubs. Is that what she does? Wow, that's exactly what Dr. Richard Campbell does.
Yeah. She's got to attack somebody to do
it. Every time I look in the mirror, except for the beard, of course.
Oh, thank you.
But also, I think it reflects badly on the sequels, because not only have they done the 5 times into the mirror device repeatedly by the time you get to the sequel, but also a way of doing it to prove your innocence.
Yeah, right.
So sort of like, you've already burned the best variations of this device.
Yeah.
So I think it behooves them to think of something else, to be quite honest, because it's already worn out by the end of this movie. Yeah, like there's the scene where she's escaping and dressing as a nurse while a sedated patient looks on. And I don't know if they're leaning into comedy, or you just can't do that scene without it being funny, because again, it's the fugitive, the guy with the oxygen mask, the old man with the oxygen mask. He's stealing his scrambled eggs.
Those eggs like he's making a sandwich out of it,
and he's drunk all that water. He's like, "Whoa, you're thirsty today." Yeah, I think it's and it's Chicago, right?
So it's Chicago, and she's on Randolph Street, the bridge. And it's great watching these movies back to back, because I realized that the 21 is drafting off a lot of this, because the character is walking on that same bridge at a certain moment in the movie.
And ER as well. I mean, it's like I've seen it in other Chicago-based.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they do. They go back to that. They go back to that bridge. Yeah, and when she gets back to her apartment, all her yuppie nightmares are aired at once because her apartment's been repainted and it's been taken over by her husband's affair with the student who doesn't wear a bra.
No. We'll find that out later at the end of the movie.
It's pretty clear here, too. This is when I wrote. Is that not in one of your frame pictures in your office?
No, I got the last one.
Oh, you got the last one, okay.
With the really thin t-shirt.
But you know what's great about that is that I was kind of wondering why have we lost a month in the timeline? And it's kind of for this reason. She can go back and the world's changed. Maybe there's a new president, or because everything's gone. Everything, her life is. It's taken that long for her life to disappear.
Took 1 month for her to lose her entire life, not just her freedom, but the one thing she thought she still had.
Yeah, and just also when she's out on the river, the cold of Chicago, like making use of the city and its regional climate. It's like, I mean, it's pathetic fallacy, the idea that like the weather and the climate takes on the emotions of the characters, which I think Dickens invented. Well, no, Shakespeare invented it, but Dickens used it quite a lot as well. So it's a great device. And
sure.
If you're going to set something in Chicago, you should have lots of.
It is the Windy City.
So she effectively chooses to become Candyman's accomplice, or at least lets him.
So
think
long
that?
as she can
Is that
save
what's
the
going on?
boy.
Yeah.
It's like she's striking
But
a bargain
again,
both with herself
Candyman,
and with
yeah.
him.
I mean, she's in a tight spot.
Sure.
As they say, brother, where art thou? But Candyman's...
We're in a tight spot here, boys.
Yeah, we're in a tight spot. Given what her loved ones are doing to her.
Yeah.
Or, the people with whom in society she identifies with. Candyman's a pretty good option. I don't think you're losing much face to become Candyman's bitch,
I thought the same thing, and that was the interesting thing about that particular scene with the husband and the new girlfriend, because they're playing it as though it's full horror for them. Like they could die any moment at her hands because they think she's a murderer by now.
Yeah.
And juxtaposing all of this, by the way, against the awful pink coloring that they're choosing to do this whole apartment in. And then I think Virginia Madsen is playing the shit out of that moment because in the short amount of time, she goes on a real journey of confusion to anger to all of a sudden you see her taking on a bit of Tony Todd within her character, and then she gives up and leaves. It's really good.
Yeah. And again, if you think of their parallel experiences as being more economic than racial, is essentially the idea. You have this affluence and then it's taken away from you.
Sure. And where do you go when you lose your affluence? You go to the projects, and that's where she goes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And then apparently, Tony Todd, other than taking a nap currently, I guess he's tuckered out because he's still painting.
Yeah.
Inside the bowels of that building.
Mm-hmm.
And you get all those murals of the terrible things that befell him.
Well, this is where it takes from the idea of Dracula, the idea of the victim secretly wants to be in the arms of the monster, or at least on an unconscious level, she's craving this. And, that romantic angle that's baked into the original premise, and then you even get the...
Almost a stabbing, like almost a stake to the heart, but she gets him more towards the neck.
And, they even have the mural showing that she looks like Candyman's original lover.
Yeah.
And this is happening. This is the same year that Bram Stoker's Dracula came out, which also has a historical doubling of lovers. So there's definitely something going on in horror cinema which is taking them in a particular direction that is maybe about, a lot of it is about becoming more refined and becoming part of genres that are more legitimate, or storytelling that's more legitimate. But then, I mean, we get to the honey kisses, when the kissing turns into bees.
I say, yeah.
There's no substitute.
I say that she gets bee kissed in my notes.
She gets bee kissed. Except, well, it's an A kiss, but it's a bee kiss.
Yeah.
And both of them have got tons of bees.
There's bees all over the place. It's one of my fun factoids that I read about this movie. I thought, God bless Tony Todd. He struck a deal that he gets an extra $1,000 for every bee sting he got.
Yeah.
And he had 23 bee stings throughout the filming of this movie. And I read that and I thought to myself, if somebody came up to me right now and said, I'm going to put some bees on you, and you are absolutely going to get stung like 25 times, but you get 25 grand, I'd be like, okay.
I was like, fuck it, make it 50. Yeah, it's and it made me think, first of all, again, why, like, we kind of know the story about Tony Todd and you know, it's like the commitment of having bees in your face, but Virginia Madsen's right there with him.
Yeah.
And nobody thinks of her as the woman with bees in her mouth.
No, true.
In the same way they do with Tony Todd. But also I was thinking about, obviously, that there's no digital substitute for this.
Right.
But also, who would be crazy enough to do that in the modern day apart from Tom Cruise? I could foresee a situation where he subjects himself to a bee attack for
Absolutely.
attention.
That guy would do anything.
But, so I'm in a double bind where I'm like,
but it always looks so good when there's real bees.
Now. But that's gone from Hollywood now. Unless you're like one of the remnant, one of the practical remnants, like Tom Cruise.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much it.
This is, I'm wary of going on a tangent, but I remember seeing the one Mission Impossible, where he's hanging off the plane, and the plane takes off.
You might have to narrow it down. No, I don't know that one. I haven't seen any of them apart from the first.
Anyway, it just seems like one of those things. Like, whoa, that's crazy, but it's like a legitimately, not just like the reason that stunt is so dangerous is because if one speck of something in the air comes at his face at that mile per hour, like it will do damage to his face.
Yeah. He puts his money where his abuser mouth is.
Yeah.
You can't fault him for that. I think that's largely why he gets away with so much of the abhorrent, illegal, and amoral behavior he participates in on a daily basis.
Are you talking about the religion now? Are you talking about his Scientology?
Oh, well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, to start, yeah. But he did a great motorcycle stunt. I mean, I'm excited when we get around.
Well, we have a new person on the list, everybody, and we'll find out more. What Tom thinks of his criminal behavior.
I'm like most right-thinking people. I'm ambivalent towards Tom Cruise. I'm excited to see the Mission Impossible films. Everyone I've spoken to tells me that they improve as they go along, and they're as close as you get to Roger Moore Bond movies in the 21st century. So, sounds like what's not to like, but I'll always find something.
Oh, yes, I understand.
I mean, there's the moral dilemma of enjoying Tom Cruise on any level. And Alec Baldwin, I believe, as well. So there's a double moral dilemma.
Well, not for all of them, but yeah, he's in a couple.
Henry Cavill, he's not a great guy either.
He's in one. You have
I think
so
I've
much
seen that one.
information on these men. I don't know any of this.
Henry Cavill's just a. Well, I should be careful. I was in a one of the last acting projects I did was an immersive experience based around the Witcher.
All right.
So, which he was in briefly and now is not, right?
I don't know.
He's been replaced by a Hemsworth. The new Baldwins, everyone.
Yes, the new Baldwins.
Anyway, my next note is Bonfire of the Vanities. Didn't that come out in around about 90? What year wasn't that Bonfire of the Vanities? A bit later in the 90s?
Say 90.
90. Because she's vain and she's in a bonfire.
I understand.
And again, obviously, like, if there's a reference here, it's the Wicker Man.
Mm-hmm.
But also the idea of the outsider meddling in traditions she doesn't understand and becoming the victim of that which she tried to help. That's essentially the story of the Wicker Man. So Candyman and Fire, Candyman and Fire.
It's a thing.
Do they say? So I'm trying to remember if they just decide to kill him with fire because it's the easiest. Because this is what they chose to do. Because
he's in the middle of our bonfire.
But do they say
like the logical
either
choice?
In this or subsequent movies that they burned him?
Yeah,
Did they burn him alive? Okay. Well,
I
then
can't
that's
remember
fine.
if the sequels say this, but I believe 21 definitely says in the end they burned him to death.
Okay.
But I don't remember if the sequels say that.
And I mean, that's the way that you kill Dracula. It's the way you kill Frankenstein. Sure. So it fits that mold as well. It's also interesting, I think, Bonfire of the Vanities is truer than just the crappy pun that I used it for, because it's all about vanity, right? It's not just that she gets caught in this fight. It's not just about that she obviously dies from this, and it's an act of self-sacrifice, but they make a thing of that she loses her hair, she's disfigured, like all the things that matter to superficial people in a cosmetic sense is stripped away from her. Mm-hmm. And I think that's interesting.
I didn't remember that, by the way. You'd think I would.
Well, I also think the reason why is that given where the movie goes from here, you might kind of want to forget it. Like, yeah. But we'll see when we...
That might be part of it.
Well, we're at her funeral.
Yes.
She gets the baby out. She burns. Off screen, she dies. And Purcell is left to console the worst husband in the world.
And the husband's new girlfriend.
And I wondered whether, like, was that?
Was that fourth person one of the academics at dinner that night? There was like a fourth white person.
There wasn't there? I don't remember them at all. I guess it would be, but I don't know if they're like thinking serially, or they're like, oh, there's Purcell. He was one of the last people we saw. He'd be a good bridge into the next movie, or whether it. Because if he didn't come back at the end, would he have started the next movie? Yeah, if he was just in that dinner scene. I'm not quite sure. But then, obviously, the moment you talked about at the beginning of this episode, the second line that appears out of nowhere, and it's kind of like it's almost like foretelling the New Orleans setting of the next film.
Yeah, it does feel like that, doesn't it?
This kind of funereal parade like they do with the second lines in New Orleans. And I guess it's kind of, like you say, it's where race comes to a head, because the white people at the funeral look visibly frightened.
Yeah, like, what the fuck is this?
It's also kind of cool. It's also kind of cool that they wrote it in a way that meant they didn't need too many people at that funeral, because everyone thinks she's a multiple murderer, so it can just be these people you're paying anyway. But I guess again the unintended consequence of it is it's very white savior complex. Because she's kind of she's usurped Candyman as the folk hero of the. I don't know if I'm reading that necessarily through the reboot too much. Did you get that sense as like she's now, she?
Yeah,
she saves the baby, but is
she
that
saves
just
the baby? But I also, because of a quirk of personal nonsense, I watch these movies out of order. So I watched 21 first and 92 last. And during 21's many puppet shows of what happened to Helen, I remember thinking to myself, is that what happens in that movie? I don't remember that at all.
I love that you said puppet show and not shadow puppets, because now I'm imagining the Muppets. How cool would that? Someone should do that. Like all the sequences that are done as shadow puppets in the 2021 version are now Muppets.
Oh, that's good.
Who would be Muppet
Candyman's
Candyman?
played by Grover.
Of course it will be Grover. What am I thinking? The monster at the end of the book.
Yeah. What a good book.
That's such a good book. The other thing that's funny about that is whenever I read the book to my son, like I Grover's actually a really hard voice to do. So I just do a gravelly Kermit. So it's a little more like this, but essentially it's Kermit.
That sounds right to me.
Oh, I am so fat. Yeah. But it's the effort.
Agreed.
So then it's a weird, unnecessary.
This is a drop off for me. Yeah,
that you feel like I want a director's cut.
Yeah.
That excises this because
the movie's over.
The movie's very much over, and it would have been way stronger had it ended on the funeral, I think.
Right.
But they decided to go back to the apartment, and I mean,
but what's odd is that this ending leans into what 21 ends up doing, with the idea of there being different Candymen.
That's
or people
or women.
Yeah.
Candy people.
Candy people.
Yeah, so it's like Helen's the new Candy Woman.
Yeah.
Which is the road less travels of sequels, because they could or couldn't get Virginia Madsen, I assume if they wanted to do it, they would have just recast her anyway.
Mm-hmm.
She's the surrogate Candy. But even the 2021 version doesn't pick up that, because I think probably because they don't have Virginia Madsen, so it doesn't make sense to do it.
They have her voice.
They have a voice, and they probably don't want to have her white woman telling black people stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just a really, because
it's going for the trope, right? So you're going for that last scare, which is a horror movie
I get
tradition.
That. But now if you say Helen into the mirror 5 times.
Yeah. And that's not the same as saying Candyman 5 times. It just isn't.
No. And I think also, I don't know, the spirit world would know whether you meant to do it or not.
Yeah, right.
Because he's just going, oh, Helen, 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 Helen.
Yeah, like,
Helen.
I miss my murderous wife, Helen, Helen, Helen. And it's such an interesting, or not interesting, but it's an oddball scene, because you already feel him lamenting taking on this grad student or whoever is living with him.
I wouldn't have mind them referencing this before the funeral or something.
Yeah, right.
But not as the ending of, like, I like the idea that he's left unhappy. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of redemption for them, because maybe, he realizes the harm he's done.
Mm-hmm.
That he might have driven her towards some of this. I like the movie's putting the blame back on him. It's never been away from him at any point. But as the button to the movie, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Oh, yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah.
But still, this is an all-around,
Oh, yeah.
really well-made movie.
Yeah, the final scene is the postscript is like it's an anomaly in an otherwise almost perfect horror movie.
And actually, I feel strange because the next movie we're going to talk about, I feel the opposite, where like the last 10 seconds are the best 10 seconds in the whole movie.
Oh, interesting. I don't know if I agree.
All right.
Last 10 seconds of the credits, you mean, right?
When you see Tony Todd.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we may have differing opinions on that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, essentially, it's interesting because as weak as that ending is, I like the idea of the credits rolling over the mural of Helen as
I do too. Yeah, I liked that.
They should have cut just straight to that, I think. I think it makes exactly the same point they're trying to make. And also, there's something, I mean, we've already, because of course we have referred to the fact that his new live-in lover is not wearing a bra.
Yeah.
But that almost feels like, I don't know, is this something the studio added on? And they were like, hey, we got a young girl with a good pair of tits. We need to use her.
Right.
Like, I don't know, like...
Well, we need two things. We need we have a nice pair of tits, so let's use them, and also this is a horror. We would like to make this a horror franchise, so we need something that says we might be back.
Yeah. Maybe next time it's Candy Woman? ?
Right.
And you know I was thinking about that for my sequel pitches, but given that neither sequel nor the reboot's gone down that road, it's probably not.
Yeah,
a good idea, a good way to go. But it's interesting because like her mural looks far more celestial. It looks like she's a Christian serial killer.
Yeah, right.
So I think it's interesting that her whiteness shines through even in the mural.
Mm-hmm. Well, credit check?
Yeah, a brief one.
All right.
Assistant to Mr. Paul. I forget who Mr. Paul is. Elliot Winks. I wonder if that's his name or they were transcribing something that was actually happening. Da 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 da. Elliot Winks. Da 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 da.
It's part of the court case. Elliot keeps winking at everybody.
It's like a transcript. Please, can you read that back? Court reporter reading it back. Elliot Winks. Title designed by Heart X Coffee equals Lightning.
Okay.
So that's just a series of images. Is the name of that title of that company?
Yes.
Heart X Coffee equals Lightning. First of all, not a good idea to make your company impossible to refer to with using words.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get word of mouth out, you need a word. Second of all, decades ahead of the emoji game.
Yeah, true.
That's how young people communicate now.
Right.
So I wonder where Heart X Coffee equals Lightning are now. Might be a time for a comeback.
Eggplant ?
And then, one of my common credit check notes to wrap up. Lead men, Joel Osborne. Swing gang, Donald Osborne.
Great.
Physical laborers on movies seem to bring their relatives along for the ride.
Yep.
I guess it makes sense. It's like summer job. I don't know why I'm assuming it's a kid. Like, these could be old men and grown children.
Yeah.
But I like the idea that it's sort of like, oh, well, what this summer we'll do a Candyman together. It's a way of family bonding. Hey, remember that summer we did a Candyman?
Is that it?
That's all I got. That's
All
it. It's a
right.
short one. Yeah, I didn't get too much love from that credit sequence.
Now, do we have inversion stuff to do, or should we keep it for the end of the last one? Do we want to just say good, bad, and
Just good, bad, yeah.
rank next?
Good, bad, good.
Yeah, it's very good.
Excellent. I felt like it was a missing piece of the puzzle in my horror film knowledge,
Nice.
and I appreciated it as a. I think you said it at the beginning. It's a great horror movie and a great movie, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, here and a couple of nitpicks here and there, but a bit of a
Nothing
flaccid
to
ending.
get too
but...
upset about.
No, I mean, it's popular culture brain food that of
Yeah,
the
it
type
really
you
is.
don't really get anymore. I mean, you don't even get the bad version of it anymore, like iRobot. You know what I mean? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
this is not good, but it's full of interesting ideas.
Right.
This is full of interesting ideas, and it's, a really effective horror movie as well.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Agreed. All right. Well, thank you, Patreon listeners. This is your $5 episode. When you hear us next, we're going to be talking Candyman from 2021, which, as it turns out, should have been on the regular feed. So congratulations. Bonus episode for you.
Also, a.k.a. The Muppets Take Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll be back in Chicago. They get that
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, if you pay $10, we'll tell you the story of how we fucked everything up. I mean, more than usual. We're always kind of telling that
Yeah,
story
we're
in one
always
way or
fucking
another.
something up, but this is
an
a
illustrative
sequel.
example. Yeah.
That movie's a fucking sequel.
Well, I have a Rudy
workaround.
Giuliani style bullshit defense for it.
All right.
So
Yeah, it's like a Halloween 2018.
sure is.
Yeah.
But would it have been where it made 10 years before? I suspect not.
Right.
That's the backbone of my defense.
All right. Anything left for you about
Nope.
Candyman from 92?
No.
This is good shit. I remember, this is should be a higher elevated in the consciousness of fandom
I agree.
kind of movie. And you know what's interesting about the sequel argument is that I think it's not that because of the sequels. And we talked about that, I think, in the ranking, where sequels seem to dictate how long a movie stays in the public consciousness. And it's not that people don't remember this movie, but they don't remember the series and think about it the same way they do Michael or Jason or a Freddy.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure why, but it's interesting just to see. Like, I also think it's stand out even in that, that explosion of horror in the early 90s where it was suddenly acceptable to watch horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those are kind of self-hating horror movies, but this feels pulpy enough to be, like a slasher, but intelligent enough to appeal to the intelligentsia, if you like.
I like
Which
that.
is a rare thing to find in a horror movie from any era.
Yeah.
But this
That's
one's got the balance just right, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's a visceral movie, and I think that's what the sequels are lacking, and the reboot too, actually.
Sure. Yeah, this movie feels like because it's literary based, it feels as though it's going for something more than a Jason or a Michael. It's going for Dracula. It's going for Frankenstein. Like that level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That level of myth, not just kind of like
Right.
myth by sequel association.
Yeah.
where we try and figure out the mythology
as we go along.
Retrospectively. So, I still remember that discussion you had on Project 1982 when you watched Friday the 13th Part 3, and I think it must have been Matt who asked you, what is Jason? Well, like, none of us know.
Yeah, no, it's not really clearly
Not least the
explained.
people making the movie. But yeah,
He's a drowned boy. He's a muscle man. He's a zombie. He's so many things to so many different people.
a space cowboy. Literally a space cowboy. I said that as a joke, but he went to fucking space.
But he went to space. It's him, Clint Eastwood, and Tommy Lee Jones.
But it's also, that contrast is also clear in how they build mythology in this, because it's almost like they have the rule book already for Candyman in a way that took 4 to 6 movies for both Halloween and the Friday
for
franchise.
Jason.
Because they repeat, we have your opening mythology statement, it's repeated again, then we get the retelling of the story, and it's all crystal clear. There's nothing muddy about it at all. It gets muddy later, but
right, doesn't start muddy.
It's very succinct to start with.
Yeah. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to tell us what you think about Candyman from 1992. So, by all means, find us on Facebook, find us on Instagram. Don't find us on X, as always, but send a thread or start a thread.
I think you can do both.
Okay, very good then. Or you can send an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com, or as always, you can, of course, just contact us right on the Patreon page, because you are our Patreon listeners.
Yeah.
All right. That's it. When you hear us next, we will be talking Candyman from 2021. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. We'll be back. Say goodbye to everybody, Tom.
I hate the color scheme. I love that was what really offended her about that whole situation.
Yes.
I can tell you that now. Don't mess with a young, upwardly mobile woman's taste in interior design.
Never.
I think that's what really turned her into Candywoman.
Yeah, she'll chuck that hot pink right at the wall. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening.